Some people tell themselves that love is supposed to hurt a little, that jealousy means they care, that control is just protection. But there's a line, invisible but real, between passion and possession. And when that line gets crossed, when obsession replaces affection and desperation turns to rage, love doesn't just hurt, it destroys. In September 2008, in a small flat in Singapore, that line was crossed in the most horrific way imaginable. 3 women would die, a teenager would lose an eye fighting for her life, and the man responsible would claim it was all because he was sent over the edge because of his girlfriend. If you like my content, then I would encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, let's lift the thin veil. Let's go back to 1996 in Tianjin, China, a northern port city where our story begins. A man named Wang Zhijian, born in 1966, was working as a supervisor at the port. He had been married, had a son, but his marriage fell apart due to what he described as incompatible differences. He was, in many ways, a man in transition, middle-aged, newly divorced, and searching for something. Around this time, at a brokerage firm, he met a woman named Meng. Zhang was different from Wang in many ways. She was a university graduate, worked for a shipping company, and seemed to have it all figured out. Or at least that's how it looked on the surface. She was also married. Her husband was a policeman, and they had a daughter together, Feng Jianyu, born in 1991, making her about 5 years old when her mother first met Wang. When they first met in 1996, neither Wang nor Zhang seemed particularly interested in each other, and eventually, Wang would get divorced. They barely spoke. It wasn't until 2005, 9 years later, that Zhang, out of the blue, contacted Wang and asked him to meet her at a coffee house. Why? She never fully explained. During that conversation, Wang poured out his heart about his divorce, his disappointments, his loneliness, and Zhang listened. Within weeks, they were dating, going out once a week, then twice a week. By March 2006, they were sleeping together. Except there was one problem. In June 2006, Zhang confessed something shocking to Wang, that she was still married. She had a whole other life he didn't know about. At first, Wang wanted to end it. He suspected she had other lovers, but Zhang convinced him otherwise. To prove her love, she took her finger, pricked it until it bled, and wrote on a piece of paper, "I love Wang." Then she asked Wang to finish it with his last name, with his own blood, which he did. But he also added, "I want to marry him." This turned out to be more than a casual affair. Wang even had Zhang's face tattooed on his back. But as tattoos a few months later would symbolize, this love wasn't as sweet as it seemed initially. Wang eventually ended up getting a tattoo of a snake on his left shoulder to symbolize her viciousness, and a skeleton and heart on the right one. The skeleton resembled Zhang, who he claimed was like death, slowly and gradually swallowing his heart. But this becomes relevant later. When Zhang's family discovered the affair, they didn't take it lightly. Her brother, sister, and brother-in-law harassed Wang relentlessly. They showed up at his workplace. They beat him up. They threatened to kill him. The pressure was so intense that Wang decided to take early retirement from his job. He received his pension of 400,000 yuan, about 81,000 Singapore dollars, which is worth about 80,000 US dollars today. The couple even fled Tianjin to Chengdu to escape the harassment, but Zhang eventually had to return because she missed her daughter. In November 2006, her husband called Wang to a meeting and asked his wife to choose between them. She picked Wang. By 2007, Zhang had filed for divorce from her husband, and not too long after that, her ex-husband suffered a stroke. Despite everything that had happened between them, Zhang felt obligated to care for him for a while. She and Wang separated for 4 months, but eventually they reconciled, and Zhang moved in with Wang, bringing her daughter, Feng, as well. Now here's an important detail about Feng. The girl who was now a teenager was not happy about this arrangement. She blamed Wang for breaking up her family. She was cold to him, dismissive. Wang tried to win her over with gifts and kindness, but nothing worked. Despite being shacked up with her lover of many years, Zhang's first concern was for her family, and she wanted to give Feng a better life. She wanted the best education for her daughter and considered sending Feng to Switzerland. When that fell through, she turned her attention to Singapore. And so, in December 2007, Zhang and her 16-year-old daughter moved to Singapore as a study mama and student, leaving Wang behind in China. Before we go further, we need to understand Singapore's study mama culture because it's central to this tragedy. A study mama, or pei-du mama in Chinese, is a foreign woman usually from mainland China who comes to Singapore specifically to accompany her child while they study in local schools. The phenomenon took off approximately the year 2000 when Singapore relaxed immigration policies to attract foreign students, but they faced severe restrictions. They can't work during their first year, and afterward, they're limited to service jobs like cleaning or domestic help. It's an isolating experience, separated from family, struggling financially. Zhang Meng would eventually become one of these study mamas. She moved into a small flat in Yishun with another study mama, Yang Chi, and their teenage daughters. Yang Chi had two daughters. Her elder daughter, who the courts referred to as Grace to protect her privacy, was with her in Singapore, and her younger daughter remained in China. Grace and Feng Xianyu actually became classmates at their respective schools. They were friends even. Both were good students. Both were trying to navigate life in a foreign country without their fathers around. Meanwhile, back in China, Wang was unraveling. After Zhang moved to Singapore with Feng in late 2007, Wang visited there 3 times in 2008. But these weren't casual visits. Zhang was actually starting to lose interest in maintaining a long-distance relationship. And so the main reason for these visits was a desperate attempt to save a relationship that was starting to crack. On his first visit in July 2008, something became immediately clear to Wang. His relationship with Zhang was going to be much more difficult than he had anticipated. When you're living in a small flat with your girlfriend, her daughter who resents you, and 2 other tenants, it becomes all the more difficult to expect privacy and to be able to communicate about personal topics. But it was also Zhang's behavior during these visits that started to become extremely bizarre and controlling. She forbade Wang from leaving the bedroom for most of the day. She wanted him to always stay naked so he'd be too embarrassed to go outside and interact with the other tenants of the flat. She controlled his movements from when he'd wake up to when he'd go to bed. Since the bedroom had no toilet, Wang had to urinate and defecate into plastic bags. He ate leftovers, sometimes food that was many days old. He was isolated and not allowed to interact with anyone except Zhang. Now these claims were made by him after the fact, so we'll never know for certain what was and wasn't true. But what we do know from the psychiatric evaluations is that Wang was experiencing extreme stress, humiliation, and helplessness during his time in Singapore. His finances were also collapsing. On his first visit in July, Wang spent all of 2,800 won he'd brought, about 600 Singapore dollars, in just 4 days, mostly on expensive food, mainly crab dinners for Zhang and Feng. He ran out of money so quickly that he had to move back in with his elderly mother back in China. On his second visit in August, things were no better. Zhang introduced him to job agents who said they could help him find work, but they all wanted upfront fees. Zhang refused to help pay these fees, saying she didn't have enough money and that Wang should be paying them. The couple argued violently and it got physical. Wang eventually left on September the 2nd, but Zhang called him back. She said Feng had been accepted to transfer to Raffles Girls' School, one of Singapore's most prestigious schools. She needed his help to arrange the move and find a new flat. Despite everything that had happened, Wang agreed. On September the 9th, 2008, Wang arrived in Singapore for what would be his final visit. He withdrew 7,000 yuan from his bank account, essentially all the money he had left in the world. Within 5 days, he'd spent about 2,000 yuan, including 120 Singapore dollars on 2 crab dinners for Zhang and Feng to eat. He was supposed to eat the leftovers, but Feng took them to school for breakfast instead. By September 18th, Wang had almost nothing left. That evening, Zhang came into the bedroom and told Wang that she and Feng wanted to eat crab again. Wang, exhausted and broke and humiliated, told her no. He reminded her they'd just eaten crab recently. He said it cost over $100 each time. He wanted to save the little money he had left. What happened next was an argument that lasted nearly an hour. According to Wang's account, Zhang swore at him. She called him poor. She said he was produced by, quote, donkeys and dogs, and it was at this point that something inside Wang broke. After the argument, Zhang went to bed around 9 p.m. Wang, naked and seething, couldn't sleep. He lay there for about an hour, his mind racing. He kept thinking about how wicked and evil his girlfriend was, how she spent his money like it was nothing, how she was unfaithful, how he was trapped in a foreign country with no money, no job, no way out. Around an hour later, Wang got out of bed. He went to the kitchen. He picked up a serrated knife, and he returned to the bedroom where Zhang was sleeping. Wang stood over Zhang's sleeping body and began to stab her repeatedly. Zhang started to scream in pain. She tried to sit up, but Wang didn't stop. He kept stabbing. According to his own account, he lost count of how many times he stabbed her, but it was later revealed to be 48 times all over her body. He just kept going until she stopped moving. As Wang was stabbing his girlfriend to death, Feng was sleeping in the living room. The sound of the attack woke her up. She heard her mother screaming, and in a moment of terrible misfortune, Feng opened the bedroom door to see what was happening. Wang saw someone in the doorway. He rushed towards her and began stabbing. Feng was stabbed 45 times. After that, Wang went into the kitchen. He looked for new weapons. He found a chopper and another knife. Then Wang went into the door of the second bedroom. Yangqi's daughter Grace was awakened by a terrible sound, as though someone was being suffocated. She heard Feng shouting something. She heard things falling. Grace and Yangqi, while they discussed whether they should call the police, heard their bedroom door burst open. Wang, armed with a chopper, rushed at them. Yangqi managed to escape the room, but Grace was cornered. Wang slashed at her with the chopper. She raised her arms to defend herself. Wang then paused, asked her to keep quiet, and left to look for Yang. But he came back. Grace tried to defend herself again. She even managed to kick him, and Wang lost his balance and fell, giving her just enough time to escape and run to a toilet and lock herself in. But Wang eventually found her, apparently because he could hear her labored breathing. He still had the chopper and a knife which he used to hack at the toilet's sliding door until it collapsed. Then he entered and began slashing at Grace's head, face, and neck. But it didn't stop there. Grace, who was bleeding and desperate at this point, muttered in a whisper, "God, let me die." Realizing she was still alive, Wang came back. He stabbed her again, this time in the back, the right ear, and the back of her neck. The attack left Grace with 41 knife injuries, but miraculously, she was still alive. Yangqi had managed to climb out the kitchen window. She made it onto the narrow concrete overhang outside the flat. She grabbed the bamboo pole holders that were embedded in the wall, the kind of poles used to hang laundry. She found herself suspended 6 stories above the ground, gripping for her life. But Wang saw her. He went to the kitchen window, the chopper still in his hand, and as Yangqi clung to these poles, Wang began hacking at her fingers, over and over, cutting and slashing. Yangqi's grip eventually weakened. Her fingers sliced and bleeding, couldn't hold on anymore, and she fell, 6 stories down. She hit the ground in the concrete below. At 12:50 a.m., police received a call. A resident had heard sounds of an argument. He'd heard the sound of furniture being thrown. He'd heard a man shouting, with sounds of him chopping something. Then, around midnight, he heard a thud accompanied with a scream. Police arrived at the Yishun HDB block and found Yangqi's body on the ground floor near the void deck. She was dead. Officers knocked on the door of the 6th-floor flat, but Wang refused to open it, and the police had to force themselves in. What they found when they eventually got inside was horrific. Blood, bodies, Wang sitting in freshly changed clothes and clean shoes calmly on the floor, with bandages on the cuts on his fingers where he'd injured himself during the attack. He looked like he was in a daze, but he didn't resist arrest. He simply surrendered. The police found 3 women. 2 were dead in the bedroom, having been stabbed a total of 98 times. Grace was barely alive, still in the toilet. She was immediately rushed to a hospital for emergency treatment. She eventually ended up losing her right eye, but the psychological trauma was immeasurable. She had watched her mother get murdered, had fought for her own life, and had nearly died in a toilet. There were 4 murder weapons, a serrated knife, a chopper, another knife, and a metal spatula, all stained with the victims' blood. The autopsy reports showed 16 of the 98 wounds on Zhang and Feng were potentially fatal wounds. The serrated knife found under the mattress of Zhang's bed had no DNA from Yang Ji or Grace on it. The doorknob leading to the second bedroom had bloodstains with Wang's, Zhang's, and Feng's DNA, indicating that Wang, after killing Zhang and Feng, had gone back to get new weapons before attacking Yang and Grace. The metal spatula found in the washing machine, which had the DNA of Wang, Zhang, and Feng, but not Yang or Grace, suggested Wang had examined it as a potential weapon, found it insufficient, and moved on to the chopper and knife. This is important because it determines Wang's mindset and his state of mental clarity and demonstrates intent. The physical evidence showed that Wang had deliberately murdered Zhang and Feng in a frenzy, then regained enough control and composure to arm himself with the new weapons and deliberately attack Yang and Grace. And all these facts are important because of what Wang would claim and what would happen in his trial. Wang claimed he snapped. He said the festering rage sent him over the edge and wiped his memory clean because of the years of trauma under Zhang. He claimed he wasn't of sound mind when he attacked the 4 women. 2 psychiatrists examined him, but they landed in opposite places. Wang's psychiatrist argued he'd snapped under years of humiliation. The prosecution's expert disagreed though. If Wang couldn't remember stabbing anyone, how did he remember to clean up, change his clothes, pack his passport, and be ready to flee? Other interviews also found no history of mental illness. In the days before the killings, Wang was jogging, shopping at the market with Zhang, even having sex with her. He was functioning far more normally than his account suggested. So the core question became clear. Was this truly a man who lost control, or someone who just chose to kill? The trial opened on November 22, 2011. The prosecution, led by Hei Hong Chun, put forward its strongest witness, Grace. Grace had been 15 during the attack. By the time she testified, at 19, despite everything, she sat in court and walked the judge through the night of the killings. The sounds that woke her, the chopper in Wang's hand, his command to stay quiet, the moment he hacked open the toilet door, and every deliberate strike that followed. Her account lined up perfectly with the forensic evidence we discussed earlier, reinforcing the conclusion that Wang had entered the room with intent, attacked repeatedly, and chased her mother when she tried to escape. When she finished, Wang's lawyers passed along a message from him. He said he was sorry. Although still bearing the scars of what happened that night, Grace survived, and against all odds, she continued her education in Singapore, with support from her mother's savings and donations from the community. She became one of the most important witnesses in one of Singapore's most significant murder trials. And on November 30th, Justice Chan delivered his decision. For Zhang Meng, he ultimately accepted diminished responsibility. According to the judge, Wang's mental state, combined with years of humiliation, had significantly impaired his mental control. The argument about crabs that Wang had with Zhang was the breaking point. For Feng, the judge reached a similar conclusion. Feng walked in while Wang was already in a frenzy. Her death was treated as part of the same loss of control episode. The verdict delivered was culpable homicide when it came to Zhang and Feng. Yang Ji's case was different. By the time Wang went after Yang and Grace, he'd had time to calm down enough to think clearly. He'd gone to the kitchen, chosen new weapons, and acted with intention. The rage tied to Zhang should have dissipated after killing her. The judge ruled he had regained control and meant to kill Yang. And so the verdict was murder, which meant a mandatory death sentence, which Wang would end up appealing. On November 28, 2014, the Court of Appeal delivered its final decision. Wang's appeal failed. The judges agreed he had intentionally tried to kill Yang by slicing her fingers with the chopper and leaving her on the ledge. And in a twist, the prosecution's appeal succeeded. The court ruled that Wang should have never been cleared of murder for Zhang and Feng. The precedent the defense relied on didn't support the evidence that Wang was not of sound mind during the attacks on Zhang and Feng, and Wang's behavior was simply too controlled and purposeful. This time, Wang was convicted of murder for all 3 victims, Zhang Meng, Feng Jianyu, Yang Ji, and received 3 mandatory death sentences. Wang Zhijian was executed on May 20, 2016 at Changi Prison in Singapore. 8 years after he murdered 3 women in a flat in Yishun, he was hanged. The case also had an impact on the area of Yishun itself. The neighborhood became, in some ways, identified with violent crime, though it's important to note that crime rates in Yishun have actually declined significantly since 2008. But ultimately, This whole tragic event became a cautionary tale about obsessive love, about what happens when romantic attachment becomes possessive and controlling, and about the intersection of mental health, financial desperation, and violence. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoy my content, then please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting on this video. It really helps it out in the algorithm. If you want to show financial support, you can join as a member on this channel, or even donate through Ko-fi or Buy Me a Coffee with the links in the description. Until next time.